Hello everyone, this is Shen Thomas with part 2 of the 12 tools of Wing Chun. The first part we talked about the first 6 tools that are part of the drill, and again, to go over them really quick, we have Gan Sao, right, and we had Man Sao, both over and under, okay, and then we have Buji, that under and over. Okay, so that's the first 3. Then the next 3 were Gan Sao from underneath, Gan Sao from behind, Bong Sao from behind, and Bong Sao from underneath. And then we have Hok Sao from underneath, and then Hok Sao from above or behind. And those were the first 6. So this next 6 I'm going to talk about a little more in depth of what each tool kind of does, how they're used, and maybe some miscellaneous information on each one that you might not know, you might not have been taught. Okay, so the first one is Pak Sao. Now Pak Sao is again with the palm. It's usually a cupping, kind of a cupping slap that jams. Okay, and quite often on the wooden dummy you see a movement with the wrist, kind of like a jut sao. So there's that movement with the wrist, and then there's also the movement of the elbow. Okay, and then that adds power to the Pak Sao. Now most of us in Wing Chun are taught Pak Sao in a drill called Pak Da, and it's where we'll have a bridge, we'll be bridged with somebody. Somebody will have their arm that we're bridged, and we'll slap that elbow down and punch. Slap, punch, same time is the drill with Pak Da. And so for this drill that we do with the 12 tool drill, this same Pak Sao goes to opposite shoulder, okay, and it's still, the Pak Sao itself, the energy of it kind of speeds up, and it kind of cups when it hits a limb, okay, and it kind of relaxes at the end. And so that relaxing kind of slapping feeling is kind of like dead weight. But then when it's relaxed, then it's able to turn into any other tool really easily, right? And so with this Pak Sao in the drill that goes to opposite shoulder, then what that does is that's that perfect angle to take any straight force that's coming at us and to push it back into the opponent. And to give you a good example of this, besides just a push or a punch that comes straight, if anybody has a grab on you, or a grab on your throat, single hand, or even double arm grab, then that Pak Sao works perfectly to come on the outside of that. And usually what we'll do is we'll come on the outside of the opponent's elbow, right? And that Pak Sao will force it and push that arm, that whole limb, right back into the opponent, into their face usually, and kind of jam them up, right? And so even if it's a double arm grab, what happens, you come on the outside of that and it forces both hands off and jams, and then that kind of frees up for a strike. So that's why we do that opposite shoulder, is it's very useful not only against, if it's a strike to the center or a push, of course your timing has to be right on with that, but with any kind of grab or throat grab, then it works perfectly, right? The opposite shoulder Pak Sao. So in the drill, we kind of start off with the Pak Sao on the center line, and we do the opposite shoulder. Okay. Now the next part of the drill, we do Pak Saos that go to the opposite hip, and what that's about is we have a set and chum cue where we kind of turn to the side and we do the Pak to an opposite hip, and that could be, you know, possibly blocking a knee, an opponent's knee, or their leg, you know, on a kick, and then we come up and punch from there, right? But this Pak to the opposite hip actually works very well, again, if somebody's grabbing us, you know, by the front or by the neck, what we do is we kind of come above that elbow, and we jam that down to the opposite hip. And then what that does is it collapses it down and kind of traps a person. So then, of course, that opens the space for us to punch. So that's why we do this opposite hip. Okay, so we're here in the actual drill. In the actual application, it would be here, right? But in the drill itself, we're just working on the tool itself, which would be the Pak to the opposite hip. And then the final part of the Pak Sao is we bring it into the center line. We go the shoulder, and then we go the face, right? So we go shoulder and face, shoulder and face. And then, of course, in the drill, we kind of do this here, you know, to kind of keep it continuous, right? But what that actually is again, if anybody has that grab onto the front of our jacket or shirt, or if they have that throat grab, what we do is we come on the outside of that arm and the elbow side, and we can pock that. We can pock that kind of forearm at the wrist, and all it takes is just that, with that elbow and that wrist, is just that little pop, and it will pop that free, right? Then we can go straight in. So it can pop that free. What it also can do is if somebody has that double grab, you're coming up between the arms, and you can pop the one free, and instead of trying to use the arm against the other, what we do is we pop the one free and we bring the elbow up. Okay, now the elbow, we don't want to be exactly parallel with the shoulder. We actually want to bring it up just a little bit more, like a little semicircle, so it can actually get on top of that other arm that's grabbing, and we can pop that free, then we can hit. So that way we've freed both arms from that double arm grab, right? So that's another application of that Pak to the shoulder strike. And so again, in the drill, we're doing it like this. So that's our Pak Sao tool. Next is Wu Sao. Now Wu Sao is kind of similar because, you know, you're seeing the palm go out there, right? But instead of this inside the palm, we're focused on this outside of the hand and this angle of the forearm. So it's a lot like what we do in Bougie, where we use that angle of the forearm to intercept, right? But we're basically, we just have that hand that's upward, and it makes another kind of hooked area. So his arm or his hand can't get past that, and then that goes forward. Okay. Now the Wu Sao itself, when you're in the middle of a fray of punches and arms flying everywhere, well, that Wu Sao works really good for slipping in and then using that almost like a Jut Sao, using that to hit the sternum or to jam a shoulder, you know, from somebody striking. It can be used kind of alongside the jaw and the neck, that angle, okay, as just a strike. But where the Wu Sao is very useful is, again, if somebody's got that single arm grab or that throat grab, that double grab, then what happens, we bring that Wu Sao up on the outside and we bring it forward. And what that does is it comes on the outside of the elbow, and as that angle goes forward, then it pushes that arm, that limb, right, and jams it into the opponent. And so it's very useful that way. In fact, I've had people that weigh a lot more than me, I've had them grab me by the throat, and by doing that Wu Sao with the elbow and the structure behind it, if your stance is correct, you can actually force that arm back, jam them, and project them back. And so it's very useful. So anyway, that's our Wu Sao on the inside, okay? On the inside and then on the outside. Now that outside works very well, and it's used in a lot of Shaolin as well, where Shaolin will punch and they'll use that Wu Sao on the outside. And what that's used for is if you strike or if you have an arm out there that gets grabbed, then that Wu Sao comes underneath and that clears you. By pulling the arm that's grabbed and then extending that Wu Sao out, and again you're using that bone of the forearm and that angle of the hand, and then that clears that. So that's a use for the outside Wu Sao. So we have the inside Wu Sao, and then we have the outside Wu Sao. Okay, and then the final drill of the next three is Gan Sao. Now Gan Sao starts with the Tan Sao and sweeps down. And it's kind of a circular kind of sweep, right? And a lot of people think of it as, oh, it's a lower block to the outside, but you can't stray too far from the center line. You stray too far from the center line and people can just circle and hit, right? So what it is we want to keep that circular kind of angle, right? But we don't want to let the hand really go past the center line. Now the useful part of Gan Sao isn't really the hand, but it's this part of the lower forearm and maybe a little bit of the pad that comes around, okay? And that sweeps anything that's kind of from here or lower and sweeps it down, okay? And then from there we can go straight in with the strike if we want, okay? Or a palm. But mainly, you know, this idea of Gan Sao isn't just sweeping something that's grabbed on or something coming low as much, again, as it's going forward. And so if somebody does have a grab, then that Gan Sao not only sweeps it down, but it sweeps it and traps it or pushes it back into the opponent. So that's why that Gan Sao kind of comes forward a little bit. Because then that helps jam anything that gets caught up in that circle, okay, and it jams it back to the opponent. So in the drill we just bring a Tan Sao forward because that starts the Gan Sao movement. And again, in Wing Chun we have something called Quan Sao, which is the Tan Sao and the Gan Sao together, working together as a pair. But in the drill, it's basically we're just kind of focused on the Gan Sao and bringing it down and forward. Now the Gan Sao works very well again against any kind of grab or even that double throat grab. That double throat grab, it can actually come over those arms, and then with the lockdown of the body weight can sweep both those arms and jam. And so what happens, the opponent gets kind of pushed and pulled down to the side by that Gan Sao. That Gan Sao comes in, because you're not just hitting these strong arms across in kind of a lateral way. It's actually a spiral forward, so it's actually coming down and pushes it in, and then that's what helps you defeat somebody's strength, because they might be able to hold up this way, but they can't hold it when it's pushing down and in. So anyway, that's your Gan Sao, and what that Gan Sao can be used for. And works again especially really good against anybody kind of reaching out and grabbing you. Then that takes care of that, and then it creates that opening for any kind of follow-up and strike and entering. Okay, so that's our Gan Sao. Then the last three tools that we use are Hok Bong, which is kind of an upward use of this forearm bone as it chops up. Okay, and you've seen that in the Buji sets. Okay, and so what that does, again, any kind of grab to the throat or double arm grab, then that will cut and chop, and what it does is it kind of pops the arm free and up, because you're not just shooting up, but you're going up and towards the person. So what it does is it pushes the grabbing opponent kind of back, and it kind of pops that free as it's chopping upward. Okay? And again, from that, then we can drop down with the strike, or come down with the kind of a chopping blow, right? So that's our Hok Bong. Now the Hok Bong is also very useful if somebody grabs your arm with one or double arm grab, then that Hok Bong can be used to move upward and to roll over the arm. So then that's where some of our spiral movements from single sticky come in handy, and then that Hok Bong allows us, with the use of a kind of a hewn Folk Sao, we're able to come around that double arm grab and break it. So that Hok Bong is very useful that way. Okay, so it's useful to any kind of double arm grab to bring both arms out from the opponent, and then we come over the top with a Folk Sao and we end up hooking both their arms, right? So that's another use of Hok Bong. Okay, so Hok Bong in the drill, I usually do forward ones, 10 of them, and then I'll do some to the side, just like in the set. Okay, and then after that we have the elbow rolls, you know. So the Wing Chun elbow and Buji, the way I've been taught is it was always having the wrists having a place to rest on the chest, where I've seen some Wing Chun people do it and they don't have anything resting on the chest, and what happens is that gives you extra structure when you hit, to have that wrist resting on the chest. And what happens is it doesn't lock that in, it doesn't lock you, because what happens is then that elbow drops and it pulls back. Okay, but then that wrist, when it's sitting against the chest, actually gives you more structure and more power with that elbow for the elbow roll. Okay, so in our lineage of Wing Chun, which came, Yip Man's first student in Hong Kong, Leung Xiang, when what Yip Man taught was very no nonsense. The very first student he taught in Hong Kong, the very first small group that he taught, I feel he taught no nonsense stuff to. So stuff that actually worked better than was taught in later years. Anyway, my opinion. But again, on our drill, what we do is we do the elbow up first. And what that is if we have our arms out and they're grabbed, then what happens is we do this elbow up first. And what that does is it kind of forces the opponent to kind of lock in and try to hold that. Quite often that strike will work if we just kind of step forward into it, because what happens is no matter how strong somebody is on holding this arm, he can't hold this part, right? So we use that as a strike to the center line, to the head, boom. Then, you might still be kind of holding on. Then we use that elbow to hit, but then that circle elbow also helps break the grab. Now the circle elbow that we do in Buji is very useful for breaking grabs. So if there's any kind of grab on the arm, all we have to do is just circle that elbow over their arm and it helps break that grab. So that's another grab breakaway that we use besides the obvious, just the attack with the elbow. Now some people in Wing Chun, when they do that elbow, they kind of come more to the side. Other people go more vertical. I see it as more kind of coming in at a 45-degree angle, and then it dissolves. It dissolves back into our chamber, right? So that's our Wing Chun elbow. Now that elbow, for the drill, we go in, we come around, we do an elbow and then out. Elbow, in, around, out. Okay. Now, another application of our rolling Wing Chun elbow is, again, if it's a single arm grab, really strong guy, or double arm grab, then what happens is we use that rolling elbow and we pivot, and then that sucks down. It breaks the grab and pulls them down. So that elbow isn't just hitting with the elbow, but it's actually, somebody has a really strong double grab, that goes over the top and it actually pulls down the opponent, pulls them down, and then after that, then you got this strike to their throat and a Pak Sao. So that's why after the roll we come up with that other elbow and then extend the arm. Okay, so that's our elbow roll. And then lastly is the chain punch. Now some people have a really beautiful, perfect chain punch, but what you need to do is actually work on the chain punch on a sandbag, right? And then when you do the chain punch on the sandbag, you realize that you can only get so many strikes in, no matter how fast you think you can go, and deliver the force, right? So every time you punch and you deliver the force, you have to relax, and more force is actually put into a sandbag. And that relax is almost like another second for that powerful strike to actually relax and like send that. It's like two shock waves. One shock wave when you hit and it kind of comes down, and then it goes back in when you're relaxed, and there's a double shock wave. And so when you're punching with power, then you want to get that double shock wave, because when somebody gets they get hit with that initial amount, and then they kind of feel it kind of push them down, like they get hit by that second shock wave. Okay, so even if you're punching really fast, you can only get so many of those in a second. And where I've timed myself, I can punch about 6 to 7 times a second. You know, if I'm really pulling back and going forward as fast as I can. Well, if you're really hitting on the sandbag for power, you're lucky to get maybe 3 or 4 per second. But the thing is I think it's better to punch slow and actually deliver the power than to punch fast and be pulling away for the next punch before you can deliver the power, right? So that's just something to be said about our sun character punch with the chain punch. Now again, this chain punch, I talked about how it creates a shield, right? So if we have it really narrow, then we don't have much of a shield here. But if we keep the angles and we don't extend too far, we just get closer, then we have the really good shield, which is like the same shield arm that is used in our Fok Sao, our forward Fok Sao. It's used in our Wu Sao. It's used in, you know, our Gan Sao, right? It's that vertical shield, right? So we want to keep that vertical shield as we're punching. So we don't want to go too much like this. We want to keep that shield, right? Now the other aspect of our chain punch is, you know, everybody gets caught up in this idea of, oh, it's like we're like kung fu dudes that are doing all this cool stuff just so we can pop somebody and like box. And it's like, no, that's not what we're doing. So even our punch in Wing Chun, right, isn't necessarily used as a punch. And a lot of people, they don't understand that. But what it is we're using, again, it's this angle that we're using, okay? And that angle can actually do more damage than the punch. This angle, if it's dropped down on a clavicle, can break a clavicle where a punch might not, right? So it's that angle that's also used for any kind of intercept and jamming. So, and again, a good example is if somebody's got that single arm grab or double arm grab, then this punch, it's actually this angle gets dropped down like a hammer. We drop that elbow, boom. And what that does is it will drop those arms. It will pull them down, collapse them, boom, on the arm. And so in a way, it's kind of like a Pak Sao. When you're bridged with somebody, instead of a Pak Sao where you're slapping, you can use that angle of the punch to hook the opponent's arm. And it's not only a hook and a pull down, but it's a shock wave because it hits so hard. And then again, it pops it down, it kind of sticks, and then you can punch the body as that gets jammed, right? So you're not just punching, right, finding an opening and punching, but you're actually cutting down with that angle and forcing it down and then hitting as at the end of that, boom, right? So then when you think of our punch that way, that it's not so much just getting the fist in to hit, but it's this angle that's cutting down and jamming down, or even pulling back, because it can be pulled back as well, and we still have that shield. So if we pull it back, we're not pulling a punch directly into us, right? But then it's like the idea of a tractor tread. I kind of think of like, you know, World War II tanks, how they have their little treads. And so this is like any arm that's coming up to stop this punch, then I'm pulling it down, and it's like a tread that's constantly going forward and climbing, right? And so it might hit resistance of 1 or 2 things, but then the next one's going to clear the area, so now a punch goes through, right? So it's not so much of, oh, I'm going to hit him 3 or 4 times. It's that I'm going to clear each obstacle that he puts out there and pull it down, and then I'm free to hit him, right? And it can also be used after the two arms are pulled down, that you hit the clavicle, and then the next punch you hit the side of the neck and you pull the head down. So you can use the chain punch to actually get in, pull the arms down, get in, and actually clomp, 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 and just run the guy over and down, right? So, and that's a lot more realistic, and in a way it's more dramatic than the Donnie Yen as Yip Man, where he's just punching, multiple punches to a guy's head, when he's down. So that's really how I see the chain punch, is it's more this double shield that's opening up. You're using these hooks to pull down, and then you can pull down and strike at the same time, or if a strike gets through without meeting any resistance, then you can hit the clavicle. You can go up on the side of the neck and be pulling the head down and hit. Okay, so again, that's what I see the chain punches doing. And again, in the drill, we're doing forward chain punches, and you can work on, if you want more of a circular, more of a elliptical, or if you're just kind of doing more straight stuff, right? But you'd still want to keep that angle. So I think it's better to do an elliptical shape to keep this angle of the shield. And again, that angle to grab and pull down. So we're grabbing without grabbing, and we're just hooking and pulling down to hit, right? And then again, reversing that, there's a way to develop power. Most Wing Chun, we develop power that's downward, right? That's what my Sifu would always talk about is this power kind of coming downward from the angles and being in the spine, right? Well, there's a way to kind of do that same thing, to shoot it upward, right? And the spine's part of that, right? But it's all from the knee. So if you get the knee pivoting and the knee actually opens up and pushes upward, then you can punch upward with that same power that you'd be punching down. So that's where you can get these upper chain punches coming from beneath, and they have just as much power as from above coming down. Okay, so that's just a couple things about each tool. And then that finishes all 12 of the tools of Wing Chun. And so thanks for putting up with me and listening to me, and I'll talk to you later.